Imagine opening your energy bill and seeing zero every month. That's Tuesday for an Amish family in Holmes County, Ohio, whose workshop has run on wind for 11 years without paying a utility company. This spiral device captures 80% of available wind, while traditional turbines get 25%. So quiet, your neighbor can't hear it. So effective, the government banned it. Why don't they want you to have this? Stay with me until the end, because who wrote those laws and why is the part that changes everything. The average American spends $1,400 a year on electricity. Over 20 years, $28,000 to a company that will raise your rate again next January, regardless of what you do. But here is the question I want you to sit with. What if the gap between 61% energy independence and 92% was already solved 10 years ago in a small Dutch town with 2 poles and a seashell? That number matters. The best traditional turbines max out at 25%. This one does 80%. But to understand why this system works, you have to understand the people who've been using wind power longer than anyone else in this country. The Amish don't reject technology. That's the part almost everyone gets wrong. They reject dependency. When rural America was wired for electricity in the 1930s, the Amish watched their neighbors plug in and then watched what happened next. The television arrived, then the radio, then every appliance that promised convenience but delivered a monthly bill. Every wire that connected a home to the grid also connected that family to a system they couldn't control, couldn't fix, and couldn't opt out of without losing everything. So the Amish said no. Not because they were primitive, because they understood something the rest of us are only now beginning to figure out, that every connection has a cost. The power line doesn't just bring light, it brings dependence. It brings a meter that someone else reads. It brings a bill that someone else sets. And it brings a single point of failure that, when it goes down, takes your heat, your water, your refrigeration, and your communication with it. They have a word for this way of thinking: Gelassenheit. It means yielding to something greater than yourself, humility, simplicity, submission to the community instead of to a distant corporation. When the Amish evaluate a new technology, they don't ask, is it useful? They ask, what does it cost us beyond money? Not the price tag, the hidden cost, the dependency it creates, the habits it changes, the community ties it weakens. A cell phone is useful, but a cell phone pulls your attention away from the person sitting across the table. A grid connection is convenient, but a grid connection means someone in a boardroom 1,000 miles away decides what you pay for heat in January. That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition across 3 centuries. Think about the last time a major storm knocked out power in your area. Maybe it lasted a day, maybe 3, maybe a week, if you were unlucky. Your food spoiled, your pipes froze, or your house overheated. You sat in the dark, waiting for a company you've been paying for decades to come fix a line you were never allowed to touch. Now think about the Amish family half a mile down the road. Their water was still flowing, pumped by wind. Their workshop was still running, powered by compressed air from a turbine. Their oil lamps were lit. Their wood stove was warm. The storm that crippled your life didn't even register in theirs. That's not luck. That's design. And here's the part that surprises most people. The Amish are actually some of the biggest battery users in America. They use 12-volt batteries for everything. Lanterns, carriage lights, barn lighting, small tools. They recharge those batteries with solar panels, small gasoline generators, and increasingly with rooftop wind turbines. In some communities in Lancaster County and Holmes County, wind turbines mounted on barns and workshops have become as common as weather vanes. When a family decides to install a windmill, the whole community shows up. Neighbors, cousins, friends. In a single weekend, they can raise a fully functional wind system from the ground. No contractors, no permits, no inspectors, just people who understand that energy independence isn't a luxury, it's a survival strategy. But there's a specific type of turbine that has quietly changed the equation for everyone, not just the Amish. And it starts with a man who looked at a seashell and saw the future of energy. In 2003, a Dutch inventor named Marinus Muramet sat down with a problem that had frustrated engineers for decades: Traditional wind turbines, the ones with 3 blades spinning on a horizontal axis, waste enormous amounts of energy. The wind hits the blades, but most of it slides off the edges or creates turbulence behind the rotor. In controlled conditions, these turbines capture about 25% of the wind's energy. In real-world conditions, on a rooftop, in a neighborhood with trees and buildings, they capture far less, sometimes almost nothing. Miramet's insight came from an ancient place. 2,300 years ago, in the city of Syracuse on the island of Sicily, a Greek mathematician named Archimedes invented the screw pump. You turn a spiral inside a tube, and water moves upward. It was so simple and so effective that the Romans used it to drain mines, the Egyptians used it to irrigate fields, and versions of it are still running in wastewater treatment plants right now in the 21st century. A device invented before the Roman Empire still works better than most of its modern replacements. That should tell you something about the power of the shape. Miramet asked a question that nobody had asked in 23 centuries. What happens if you reverse it? Instead of turning the screw to move the fluid, you let the fluid move the screw. Instead of water, you use wind. Instead of pumping, you generate. The same spiral geometry that Archimedes used to push water uphill could be used to pull energy out of the air. He spent 3 years developing the math. He brought in another engineer, Richard Ruchenbeek, to refine the aerodynamic calculations. In 2006, they patented the design under a company called the Archimedes, based in Rotterdam. By 2016, a factory in South Korea was mass producing it. They called it the Liam F1 urban wind turbine. And the numbers it produced made every other residential turbine on the market look like a toy. The Liam F1 has a diameter of 1.5 meters, about 5 feet. It weighs roughly 100 kilograms. It looks nothing like a traditional turbine. It looks like a nautilus shell, that spiral seashell you find on the beach. And that shape isn't decorative. It's the reason the thing works. The spiral form creates a 3-dimensional intake that funnels wind into the center of the rotor, converting kinetic energy into mechanical rotation with almost no resistance. The company claims an energy yield of 80% of the theoretical maximum. 80%. When the industry standard is 25, 80 is not an incremental improvement. It is a different category. And here's where it gets practical. The Liam F1 starts generating electricity at a wind speed of just 2 meters per second. That's a gentle breeze, the kind of wind that barely moves a flag. Most conventional turbines need 5 or 6 meters per second just to start spinning. In real neighborhoods, where buildings and trees create unpredictable gusts and swirling air, traditional turbines sit idle most of the day. The Liam keeps turning. It also has a built-in mechanism that automatically points it into the wind. No software, no motors. The conical shape acts like a weather vane. It self-aligns. Wind can hit it from up to 60 degrees off-center, and it still generates power. In an urban environment where wind changes direction every few seconds, this is the difference between a turbine that works and one that's an expensive decoration. One unit generates about 1,500 kilowatt hours per year at an average wind speed of 5 meters per second. The average American home uses about 11,000 kilowatt hours per year. So one turbine alone covers roughly 14% of your electricity. But that number alone doesn't tell the real story. Because nobody is suggesting you use wind alone. The real breakthrough happens when you combine this turbine with solar panels. And this is where the math gets exciting, so stay with me. Solar panels work beautifully in summer. Long days, direct sunlight, high output. June, July, August, your panels are producing more than you can use. You feel great about your investment. Then September arrives. The days get shorter. October brings cloud cover. By December, your solar array is producing a fraction of what it did 6 months ago. You're buying electricity from the grid again. The meter is spinning. The bill is climbing. And you're wondering why you spent $15,000 on a system that only works half the year. This is the dirty secret of solar-only systems. Nobody in the solar industry wants to talk about it because it undermines the sales pitch. But the data is clear. Solar production in northern states drops by 60 to 70% between October and February. And those are the months you need the most energy because you're running heaters, you're running lights longer, and the sun sets at 4:30 in the afternoon. Now, here's what wind does. Fall and winter bring stronger, more consistent winds across most of North America. When one system fades, the other surges. October through March, the exact months that bankrupt your solar investment, are the peak months for wind generation. The two technologies aren't competing, they're completing each other. Solar handles the summer, wind handles the winter. Together, they cover the year, and the data backs this up in a way that should make you sit forward. In one documented installation, a home running only solar panels achieved 61% energy self-sufficiency over the course of a full year. 61% sounds decent until you realize it means you're still buying 39% of your electricity from the utility company. That's roughly 4 months of the year where the grid owns you. When a single Liam F1 was added to that same home, the self-sufficiency rate jumped to 92%. That 31 percentage point gain came almost entirely from the fall and winter months, the exact months when solar alone left homeowners writing checks to the power company. 92% self-sufficiency. That means for practically the entire year, you're producing everything you need, your meter barely moves, your bill is practically zero, and the utility company that's been collecting $1,200 a year from you suddenly has a customer that costs them more to service than the revenue they collect. That is why they do not want you to know about this. Since its launch, the Liam F1 has sold more than 7,000 units across 14 countries. It's been tested in temperatures as low as minus 20 degrees Celsius, that's minus 4 Fahrenheit in South Korea. It works in Arctic cold, the exact conditions that kill solar output and make traditional turbines brittle. In the Netherlands, the company presented a concept called the butterfly pole in the municipality of Westvoorn, a single mast, 8 meters tall, with 20 solar panels on the sides and a Liam turbine on top. One pole produces 575 kilowatts. The town installed 2 of them in the village square, 2 poles, and the town had enough energy to disconnect from the grid entirely. 2 poles in a town square, 0 energy bill, and this was documented nearly a decade ago. So the obvious question is, why isn't this on every rooftop in America? Why are there 7,000 of these in 14 countries, but almost none where you live? Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you, and it's also the part that explains why you've probably never heard of this turbine. Because the answer involves something that should make you angry. In the United States, solar panels are legally protected. 25 states have solar access laws that prevent homeowners associations from banning solar installations. California has the Solar Rights Act. Texas has Property Code Section 202010. Florida, Arizona, Colorado all have statutes that say your HOA cannot stop you from putting solar panels on your roof. If your neighbor plants a tree that shades your panels, some states give you legal standing to challenge it. Solar has political protection. Solar has lobbying power. Solar has a multi-billion-dollar industry behind it, making sure those laws stay on the books. Wind has none of that. 0. Residential wind energy in America has no equivalent federal protection. No access laws, no guaranteed right to install. Your city council can ban rooftop turbines tomorrow, and there is no state or federal law stopping them. Your HOA can add a single line to the covenants next month that says no wind devices of any kind, and you have no legal recourse. None. You can appeal, you can argue, and you will lose because the law isn't on your side. Local governments regulate rooftop turbines under zoning laws that control structure, height, noise, setbacks, and visual impact. And here's the key. Those regulations were written for the old-style turbines, the loud ones, the tall ones with spinning blades that look like industrial equipment on top of a house, the ones that whipped through the air at high speed and created a constant low hum that drove the neighbors crazy. Those turbines deserved the regulations, but the rules never got updated. The Liam F1 is 5 feet wide. It sits just above the roof line. It produces less noise than a conversation across the dinner table, under 48 decibels. In most neighborhoods, the ambient noise from traffic is louder than this turbine, but the regulations don't distinguish between a 60-foot wind tower and a 5-foot spiral shell. The same rules that block a commercial-grade turbine also block the Liam because the language was never updated. And nobody with the power to update it has any incentive to do so. And there's one more barrier that keeps this technology out of American hands. There are no certified installers in the United States. Not one. The manufacturer is Dutch. The production is in South Korea. The distribution network serves Europe and Asia. If you buy a Liam F1 today, you're importing it yourself and you're installing it yourself. That means understanding 3-phase AC power systems, MPPT charge controllers, dump load management, and how to assess whether your roof structure can handle 100 kilograms of rotating mass. For someone with electrical experience, it's completely manageable. For a retired school teacher or a guy who's good with a hammer but never wired a panel in his life, it's intimidating enough to stop the whole project before it starts. Now ask yourself, who benefits from that arrangement? Who benefits from a system where solar is protected by law and backed by a massive installation industry, but wind, the technology that fills the exact gap solar cannot, is left unprotected, unregulated, and unsupported? Follow the money. Solar alone gives you 61%. Solar plus wind gives you 92%. The 31% difference is the part the utility company still gets to charge you for. That gap is worth billions of dollars a year across the entire country. Every single home that closes that gap is a home that stops paying. The solar industry doesn't mind the current setup. They already sold you the panels. They got their check. The utility company definitely doesn't mind. They still own your winter bill. The only person who loses in this arrangement is you, the homeowner, who spent $20,000 on solar, did everything right, followed every recommendation, and still writes a check to the power company from October through March. You were told solar would set you free. It set you 61% free. The other 39% is still someone else's revenue stream, and nobody who profits from that gap has any reason to help you close it. But here's where the Amish way of thinking changes everything. Because the Amish never waited for permission, they never asked a zoning board if they could install a windmill, they never filed for a permit, they never hired an inspector to sign off on a structure they built with their own hands. When one family decides they need a wind system, the word goes out. Saturday morning, a dozen men show up with tools and lumber and hardware. By Sunday evening, the windmill is standing, the pump is connected, and the water is flowing. No contractors, no building department, no 6-week wait for approval, just people who understand that self-reliance is not something you request. It's something you build. That's not just a construction method, that's a way of life. It says you do not need a corporation to give you energy. You do not need a government office to approve your independence. You need knowledge, you need materials, and you need people around you who believe the same thing you do. The Amish have all three, and they've had them for 200 years. Now think about what that means for the Liam F1. Think about why this specific turbine is so dangerous to the current system. It's small enough to install without a crane. 2 people can mount it on a rooftop pole. It's quiet enough that your neighbors 3 houses down won't hear it running. It's efficient enough to actually make a measurable dent in your energy bill. And it's simple enough that someone with a good weekend, a wiring diagram, and a decent set of tools can have it spinning by Sunday night. It doesn't need a construction crew. It doesn't need heavy equipment. It doesn't need a 6-figure investment. It just needs someone willing to do what the Amish have always done, take responsibility for their own power. There's one more thing you need to know, and it's the reason I saved it for last, because this is the detail that changes how you think about all of it. When engineers design wind turbines, they study the Nautilus shell. That spiral, the one you see on the Liam F1, isn't just an engineering choice. It follows the Fibonacci sequence, the mathematical pattern that shows up everywhere in nature, sunflower seeds, hurricane formations, the spiral arms of a galaxy, the curve of a wave about to break. For 2,000 years, nature has been optimizing that shape to move fluids with the absolute minimum resistance. Not engineers, not computers, evolution. Trial and error across millions of generations, selecting for the shape that wastes the least energy. The Liam F1 doesn't just borrow from nature, it copies nature's final answer to a problem that took the entire history of life on Earth to solve. And because the turbine is a solid three-dimensional mass spinning at low angular velocity, it doesn't create the invisible high-speed blade tips that kill birds and bats by the thousands every year. Traditional turbine blades move so fast at the tips that birds literally cannot see them coming. The Liam is a visible, slowly rotating mass. Animals see it and avoid it. In over a decade of field testing across multiple countries and thousands of installations, bird strikes on spiral turbines have been practically non-existent. The shape that makes it efficient also makes it safe. Now, let me tell you about the butterfly pole, because this is the concept that should have changed everything when it was unveiled. In the small municipality of Westvoorne in southern Holland, the Archimedes presented a demonstration concept, a single mast, 8 meters tall, roughly 26 feet. On the sides of that mast, they mounted 20 solar panels. On top, a single Liam F1 turbine, one pole, solar and wind on the same structure. That single pole generates 575 kilowatts of power. The town put 2 of them in the village square, 2 poles, and the entire square, lighting systems, everything was powered independently from the grid, no cables running to the power company. No monthly invoice, 2 poles in a public space, and the grid became optional. That was documented nearly a decade ago, and you've never heard of it. Ask yourself why. But I want you to hear the part that nobody talks about, the part that connects everything in a way that makes this real, not just interesting. In rural Pennsylvania, there is an Amish engineer, and yes, those 2 words absolutely go together, who is building a workshop specifically designed to manufacture small wind turbines, not to generate electricity. The Amish don't want electricity running through their homes. That's the whole point. These turbines are designed to produce compressed air. Think about that for a second. Wind turns a spiral rotor. The rotor drives a compressor. The compressor fills a steel tank with pressurized air. And that tank, sitting in the corner of a workshop, runs every single tool in the building. Lathes, drill presses, table saws, sanders, pneumatic nail guns, every piece of equipment powered by the same wind that was blowing across that field anyway, doing nothing. No wires, no grid, no bill, no meter, just wind turned into work. Free work that runs as long as the breeze blows. That Amish engineer isn't reading academic papers about renewable energy theory. He's building the solution in his barn. He's testing it on his property. And when it works, and it's already working, his neighbors will walk over on a Saturday morning and help him build the next one. The way they've always done it, the way it was always supposed to work before someone decided that energy had to come with a monthly invoice. That is the final piece, because it tells you that this technology isn't theoretical. It isn't a prototype waiting for funding. It isn't a concept in a university lab. It's already being built by hand by people who figured out decades ago that the system was designed to keep you paying. The turbine exists, the math works, the efficiency is documented across 14 countries. The only thing standing between you and a 92% reduction in your energy dependence is the decision to stop waiting for someone to give you permission. And here's something worth knowing about the imitations, because this is the trap that catches most people. If you search online right now for spiral wind turbines, you'll find dozens of cheap knockoffs. Amazon, AliExpress, random websites with stock photos and 5-star reviews that all read like they were written by the same person. Plastic rotors with undersized generators shipped from a factory that has never tested aerodynamics, priced at $200 or $300. They look like the Liam. They are absolutely not the Liam. Those units fail within months. Their generators can't handle real wind loads, the bearing seize, the magnets overheat, the wiring corrodes, their plastic blades warp in summer heat and crack in winter cold. They have nothing to do with the decade of aerodynamic research, the wind tunnel testing, and the mathematical modeling that makes the genuine design work. The spiral shape only produces 80% efficiency when every curve, every angle, every millimeter of the blade is precisely calculated. A plastic imitation that looks roughly spiral-shaped doesn't capture wind. It wastes it, just like every other cheap turbine that came before. If you're serious about this, and I mean genuinely serious about cutting your energy bill and building a system that works for the next 20 years, do not buy the $200 imitation. It will fail, it will underperform, and worst of all, it will make you believe that the whole concept of residential wind doesn't work, which is exactly what someone is counting on. Because every person who tries a cheap knockoff and gives up is one more customer who stays on the grid, paying their monthly bill and telling their neighbors that wind energy is a scam. That is not an accident. That is a business model. The real Liam F1 was engineered over 10 years of testing, built from fiberglass reinforced plastic designed to withstand minus 20-degree winters and tropical heat, designed to spin in winds so light they don't register on most weather apps, tested in Korean winters, Dutch storms, and Mediterranean summers. Proven across 14 countries and 7,000 installations, it carries a warranty, it has documented performance data, and when combined with even a modest solar array, 6 or 8 panels on a south-facing roof, it brings your home to a level of energy independence that most utility companies would rather you never discovered. Think about what that means for your life. Not just the money, though. The money matters. An average American household spends $1,400 a year on electricity over 20 years. That's $28,000 paid to a company that didn't build your house, didn't insulate your walls, and didn't install your appliances. $28,000 for the privilege of being connected to a system that fails during the exact moments you need it most. But the money is the smallest part of this. Think about what it means to know that when the next ice storm hits, when the next heat wave overloads the grid, when the next rate hike shows up on your bill, none of that reaches you. Your system keeps running, your home stays powered, your food stays cold, your heat stays on. Your life doesn't pause because someone else's infrastructure failed. That's not a fantasy. That's what 92% self-sufficiency actually looks like, lived out every single day. The Amish understood this before the grid existed. They built their entire way of life around a simple truth: the less you depend on systems you can't control, the more you actually own your life. They weren't backward. They weren't afraid of progress. They were ahead of all of us by 200 years, and the technology that lets the rest of us finally catch up is sitting right there, shaped like a seashell, 5 feet wide, spinning in a breeze most turbines can't even feel. When the next major solar storm disrupts communications, when the next grid failure leaves millions in the dark, the Amish will do what they've always done. They'll wake up, pump their water, power their tools, and go about their day. The question is whether you'll be doing the same, or whether you'll be sitting in a dark house waiting for someone to flip a switch you were never allowed to touch. If you're the kind of person who believes that real, practical knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit margin, you already know what to do next. Here's what I want you to tell me in the comments. Have you ever looked into wind power for your home? And if so, what stopped you? Was it the cost, the regulations, or the fact that nobody around you was doing it? I read every single comment, and your answers shape what I cover next. Hit subscribe if you want to keep recovering the knowledge they never wanted you to have, because next week, I'm going to show you a water heating method that the Amish have used for over a century, one that a university study from 1987 proved was 40% more efficient than the system in your basement right now. And the reason you've never heard of it is the same reason you've never heard of this turbine. Someone profits from your ignorance. I'll see you in that one.